Hi, guys. Welcome to the Franky Balls Show, starring Franky Balls with my life coaching podcast. Today, we're going to talk about relationships. As most of you probably already know, I've been married for 20 years and I've had over a dozen long term relationships while I was married. I've always had the same wife. We've been open now for about 10 years. And by open, I mean completely open. She can date whoever the heck she wants, whenever she wants, do whatever she wants with that person. She can have as serious of a relationship as she cares to with them. She can travel with them. She can live with them on a part time basis if she wants to. She can go on vacations. She can go without my permission. She has 100% free autonomy of her love life. I also have the same autonomy, and that's why I've had multiple long term relationships with different girls. I feel like I'm probably the expert and the world's best person in game to talk about relationships with because I've been in one for so long. I started practicing game in the middle of a 20-year marriage. After 10 years is when we opened it up. And even when I was in an open relationship, it's not like I went out and did cold approach pickup and did a whole bunch of fucking chucks. What I would usually do is I would build momentum by going out to bars and clubs or taking a boot camp or something. Start to get a lot of momentum because I was going out so often, and then I'd pick up a girl at a gym or at the bar or something like that, and I would, as soon as I'd find a girl to have sex with or to have a relationship with, I would have a long-term relationship with that girl. Now, some of those relationships lasted 3 months or 2 months, and some of those relationships lasted a year, but all of those relationships happened while I was married to my wife, Chelsea. And she knew about all of them. She knew their names. She knew, like, where we were in the relationship. She knew how long we'd been dating for. Like, when I say an open relationship, this is one of the truly real open relationships. It's not one of these relationships where you're not allowed to kiss the girl or your wife, like, gets to read all the texts. Or it's not like that at all. It's like a real, pure, open relationship. So a lot of people get me confused and they think that, oh, Jeff, you're into cold approach pickup and you're also married. You must be either blue pill or purple pill. And the fact of the matter is, I'm neither of those. I view myself as extremely red pill, more red pill than I would say 90% of the dating coaches out there. And I would say I'm 90% purest red pill and 10% blue pill. And the reason I say that is because in relationships, if you treat your girl the same way you treated her in the first 7 days of a relationship, a year into it or 3 months into it, that relationship's not going to go very far. I think the one area in the game community that needs more clarity is the relationship area. There's a reason why all these pickup artists don't have 20-year marriages under their belts, and I'm not saying that they couldn't. Maybe some of them choose not to, but I do feel like there's a lot of bad advice out there when it comes to having a relationship. Most of the time, people think the advice that would apply to a relationship that's lasted 5 years is the same as the advice to get that girl attracted to you in the first 5 hours. And it couldn't be further from the truth. You really, really, really have to tone down your game when you're in a marriage. Like, it's not this you're the chief and she's some submissive little damsel in distress. That's not what's going on in a marriage or any long-term relationship. If you use the same game tactics you use it to get a girl attracted in the first 5 hours after you've been dating a girl for 5 months, you have a lot of fights and a lot of carnage and probably a lot of failed relationships in your future. That's not to say that you be blue pill and you give her all the power. You always hold all the power, but you have to collaborate with the girl in a way that makes sense for her. She wants to be that one that you kind of bend the rules for. So we're going to get into that, but first a little bit more about my history and about relationships in general. So like I said, when I was 19 years old, I married my wife, and for the first 10 years, I was into self development just as much as I am now. But most of the books I read would be like The Color Code of Personality, Stephen Covey's Seven Habits, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, very blue pillish relationship type books. And those books work great for relationships. I don't think that I disagree with them for the most part. But the one aspect of those books that I don't think many people realize is there's zero element of red pill in them. And so why I say I'm about 90% red pill and 10% blue pill is because I think purple pill is destructive, because it's this mixture of energy that really doesn't have a pole to it. It's like you break a bunch of positive magnets apart and you break a bunch of negative magnets apart, and then you try to blend them together in a blender and you get this purple pill bullshit that a lot of people seem to be peddling in their self-development programs these days. And it doesn't make sense to me, as somebody who's been a specialist in relationships, especially unique relationship structures. And what I mean by that is when you're in a relationship, in a long-term relationship, you need to be red pill, extremely red pill for very short periods of time. And then you need to just chill the fuck out and quit trying to be such a fucking player all the time, and just relax and enjoy the girl's company and get to know her and be nice and, cuddle and do a lot of these things that the red pill community labels blue pill. But every once in a while, in my relationship, in my marriage especially, for a while there, about every 6 weeks on the dot, just about, I would have a need to insert some red pill into the relationship. And so you, at those times, you would have to show your girl that you're the man in the relationship. You'd have to show her that you demand holding the power in the relationship and that she was a submissive one. And at those periods of times, about every month or 6 weeks or so, you're going to have to do a demonstration, I would say, of red pill assertiveness type thing. So she's going to test you a little bit, and not everything girls do in relationships is a shit test. That's another massive misconception in the pickup community, is everything a girl does is a shit test. Maybe that's true in the first 7 days or maybe even 7 weeks, but 10 years deep, no, I don't think that's true anymore. But every once in a while, your girl wants to know that you're still the man. So she'll do something to test you. She'll push your boundaries. And at this time, you just need to decide, is this just her being whatever and I don't need to worry about it? Or is this her actually giving me a test? And a test is probably a bad name for it, because I don't think she's doing it consciously. But the way that I always tell is there'll be a period of time where if you don't address the issue in a manly way, it will persist. So it's not like one of those things where she, if she's normally home at 7 o'clock or something and makes you dinner, and then one day she's home at 9 o'clock and kind of gives you the fuck off vibe, you might interpret that as a test, and it might be a test, and it might not. So the way you determine that is, does the behavior continue, right? Does she do that one day, and then the next day she's not folding your laundry, and then maybe the next day she goes out and spends a bunch of money on your card without talking to you about it first? She's going to just continue this pestering for days and days and days until you address it like a man. After you address it like a man, she's going to have an emotional response to it, and you're probably going to have a fight, which is natural in relationships. And then at that point, you just have to show her that you're the man. Not every single time do you have to, play that asshole card that I can fucking leave anytime. But I'd say every 2 or 3 years, you truly do have to be in a position and have to be of mental capacity that you could walk away. Ironically, being in that position where you could walk away and knowing and being willing to do that will make it so you never have to. And so, like I said, about every 4 weeks, 8 weeks, every girl's different. With my wife, at one period, I got her down to every 6 months we'd have to have one of these big fights. The longer you're in a relationship together, the longer it seems like you can go without having one of these big fights. But at that time, you have to be pure red pill. That's when the red pill comes out. That's when the masculinity shows. That's when she gets to realize that you're the man in the relationship and she's the woman in the relationship, and that's what she wants. And that's when you're red pill. So the longer your relationship is, the less red pill you kind of have to be with your wife, but you have to sprinkle it in more and more, or less and less as time goes on. During those first 7 hours or 7 days, you have to be 80 or 90% red pill like all the time. You have to view everything as a bit of a shit test. You have to always hold the frame, never let her have the frame. You have to be like really on your game for those first periods of time. But the longer a relationship goes, the less you have to do that. I think that is something that the pickup community has gotten wrong. And I also think there's evidence of that. People will probably disagree with me on that, but I would suggest just looking at the evidence. Whatever pickup artist that you're following and you're using as a life coach, ask yourself how many long term relationships have they been in? Are they successful? And does that guy have the power to continue to sleep with other girls and do whatever he feels will make his life better? And if the answer is yes, well, by all means, maybe mix some of his advice in with some of mine. But I just don't know that many people who are very, very good at cold approach pickup who also are able to have 10 or 20-year relationships with the same girl. So it's a rare thing, but I can see why it has happened, right? Like when people are good at cold approach pickup, the way they get their followers usually is by showing all that flashy stuff on YouTube, and all that flashy stuff is the first 5 or 7 minutes of pickup. There's very few YouTubers that are going to go be like, hey, look at me and my wife watching Netflix or going to a movie or having wings on wing night on year 5. It's just not very entertaining. But what is entertaining is that first 5 minutes where you pick a girl up, spin her around, and kiss her, and everybody knows you just barely met her. So as a result of that, there's very good information out there for those first 5 or 10 minutes, and very, I would say, little good information for people who have kind of taken the red pill but also want to have a 10 or 20-year relationship with the same girl. The other thing is that I'd like to say about relationships, and we'll dive into this very, very deep on very minuscule topics in the future, but the main pickup artists out there, and I love these guys. They're awesome. Tom Torero is the one that comes to mind for me. He's been a mentor of mine for a very long time, and there's a lot of people out there that say, well, men are not monogamous, which I don't think we are, and therefore you just have to fucking chuck girls for the rest of your life or have these short 3-month relationships or 2-year relationships. He's kind of not one life partner, and for the people who do that, I'm sure their game is going to get just absolutely amazing by the time they hit 60 years old and everything. And I kind of like I envy them a little bit in that way. But on the flip side of that coin is the relationship style that I've felt the most fulfilling in my life, which is long-term relationships. And I don't know for myself personally, and maybe for you, you'll have to do a little bit of introspective thought to find out what type of person you are. But for myself, I know one thing's for sure. There's nothing that I love more than being with the same girl for 20 years and knowing that I'll probably be with her for the rest of my life, or at least she'll be an important part of my life in some capacity until I die. And there's a feeling and a comfort and just a fulfilledness that you feel when you live with the same girl for 20 years and you have 2 kids with that girl and you're downstairs watching TV and your kids come down and they know you as dad and you're an active part of their life and you're giving them advice and they look up to you, and your wife comes down and she makes you dinner, and there's that aspect of life that to me, maybe not to you, but to me, is very, very, very fulfilling. So maybe you'll be able to be in a relationship where eventually you can open it up. fully like I have. Maybe you're going to be in a relationship where you can open it up partly. I've experimented with that before too, where, okay, when we go to Vegas for this week or this month, we'll be in an open relationship then, or, maybe you'll find something like that. But I'm just saying that I think there's an aspect of relationships, especially extremely long-term relationships, that if you're planning on doing cold approach pickup, that you probably won't ever get if you're going to do fucking chucks or 2-year relationships or less for the rest of your life. So there's that aspect to consider, and I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. I do think that there is a way that you can have both. And a lot of you are probably thinking now, yeah, Jeff, you probably have one of these freak wives, right? You probably have one of these wives that you met at a strip club that's a complete nymphomaniac. I know that's probably what I would think, looking at my position from afar. But nothing could be further from the truth. And I think that's one area that in one of our cold approach pickup podcasts that we need to explore more is these girls that don't sleep with you right away. I know most people think it's because your game's not good or this or that, but I think there's an area of pickup that hasn't been explored yet, and I think that area is with these girls that don't have sex necessarily with you, like in an extremely short manner. So what do I mean by that? With my wife, for example, we got married when I was 19, but I met her 2 years before that. We dated for just about 2 years before we had sex. And we had an extremely strong bond and everything before we had sex. And to be honest, most of the girls that I've had the freakiest sexual relationships with, and also the relationships that have been the most open, like where the girlfriend knows about my wife and my wife knows about the girlfriend. They never meet or anything, but just where they're cool with each other from afar. Almost all those relationships didn't start with immediate sex. They all started with trust first. And so I'm not saying that that's the only way to do it. I'm just saying that's the way I did it. And that way for me has been tremendously successful. If I meet a girl and she doesn't want to have sex for 3 dates, 4 dates, 5 dates, 6 dates, in my mind, that's actually a good thing as long as I have the masculine polarity frame and as long as I'm the one that's almost kind of pulling the sex back because I don't want it to happen before I have massive amounts of rapport and a huge amount of trust. And if I build that rapport, that comfort, that trust to such a strong degree that that girl trusts me before she has sex with me, you can use that as, I don't want to say bargaining chip, but you can use that level of comfort she has with you to have a relationship that's a lot more open. Now, that's not to discount all the pickup artists saying, fuck girls as quickly as you can and build a relationship from there. I know that's what's going on or that's what the common thing is in the community. But my opinion on it is I think we only know about 20% of game so far. If there's 100 pieces of knowledge out there in the game community that us men as a group have to find out, I think we've only found out about 20 of them. And I think part of the reason for that is because most of the people that are in the pickup community right now all come from a very similar background of not having very good luck with girls and then, following this kind of like almost college like linear path to being good with women. In my opinion, I think there's another 80 units or 80% of the knowledge out there that we haven't figured out yet. And I think we need more people in the community that come from different backgrounds, from more diverse backgrounds. And so I think my contribution or the things that I've seen in the pickup community that I haven't actually experienced with my multiple long-term relationships or my wife or anything, I'm hoping can open up a little different area. And one area that I've noticed is, at least for me, the girls that I sleep with right away aren't really willing to have like a really long-term multiple relationship with me that spans years with trust and monogamy on her part in some cases. And these odd relationships, they tend to be with the girls that are the ones that are hard to get to sleep with at first, and maybe not hard to get to sleep with, maybe they would sleep with you, but the ones that you just if you could sleep with them with 1 unit of trust, you build 25 units of trust before you sleep with them. The other thing that I think is different with relationships compared to a lot of the times what the pickup community kind of promotes is the fact that it's almost like it's almost like a binary choice they view for girls in some ways, where it's kind of like either you're the complete alpha and the girl will just give you this crazy wild sex, or you're the complete beta and she's going to be a starfish. I know not all pickup artists think that, but I think that's kind of like a little bit of what's been going around the community, and I think that's true in a lot of cases. But I've found some cases where that couldn't be further from the truth. And I guess it depends also on your definition of alpha and beta, but I'll just give one example here of a girl that worked for me. And I didn't pick her up in a very alpha way. I picked her up in a very beta way, even though I feel like I am alpha and I kind of do know the game and everything. But she worked for me. She's seen my financial statements. She's seen how many people work for me. And it was kind of using money almost. It was almost like playing money game with one of my employees. At the time, she was dating this huge alpha dude with neck tattoos, and he was selling coke and everything. I found out later, like just very like, he'd tell everybody to fuck off if they did so much as look at him wrong. Like just like an extreme, like what most people would consider an extreme alpha. That's who she was dating. And anyways, I felt like, especially compared to the neck tattoo guy, I was playing a very beta game compared to the neck tattoo guy. But the kind of sex that I heard she was giving him through other employees, and this guy was my friend before I started sleeping with this girl, and before we got into a fight where I found out he was stealing stuff from me and a bunch of different things too, so I didn't feel so bad about sleeping with his girl afterwards. But was that this girl that was interested in me and him, this girl was very mild mannered with this alpha dude, kind of the starfish with him. And I have to admit, when I started talking to her, it was very 50 Shades of Grey. She was very willing to do anything to get the resources. So I think there's an area of game in that avenue that needs to be explored a lot more too. Because just to give you a few simple examples of different things that she would do for me that she wouldn't do for her quote unquote alpha boyfriend was she wanted to have a contract with me where when she like combed her hair out, that she would be thinking about me fucking her when she was still with her boyfriend. Or she would do things like along the lines of, I'm never going to cut my hair unless you tell me I can. She was just almost demanding this very 50 Shades of Grey, you have permission to dominate me type sexuality with me, as compared to the guy that she was, I guess, kind of still seeing. Now that might piss off a lot of people listening to this, but like I never actually acted on it until they were actually broken up. Even though, some of the things that he did in my company were, you would probably, if I got into that, excuse me for entertaining his girlfriend trying to like get this guy's boss. So I think there's an area there also when it comes to relationships that we don't quite understand, that probably needs to be explored. And it's going to be super exciting to go into the future and find out some of these little rabbit holes of game as more and more people come to start keeping statistics and start keeping track of how different girls react to different types of guys and how different girls react to different things. Now that our community is branching off from the standard route of linear game progression of, being bad with women or not getting very many girls, and then learning cold approach pickup through all of the awesome mentors that are out there now, and then getting good at cold approach pickup, and then almost in a retaliatory fashion trying to fucking chuck as many girls as possible. I know not everybody does that, but I do think that there are a lot of guys out there that, understandably so, you suck with girls and now all of a sudden you can fuck whoever you want. It'd be pretty tough to tie yourself down at that point. I understand that. But now that we're starting to get some other guys into pickup, I think out of the 20, we know 20 out of 100 units of pickup now. And I think in the next 10 or 20 years, maybe we'll get another 20 or 30. It'll be interesting to see when my son's my age, how much how much the tables have turned for his generation and those willing to make themselves uncomfortable to learn it. So that's my first podcast on relationships. I've had a lot of different weird experiences being a boss, playing a little bit of provider game just to see how it went, being in an open relationship with my wife, but also having other relationships that I've met those girls through cold approach pickup and dated them for a couple years. And also just seeing my wife's point of view. When you spend 10 years in an open relationship with a girl who you know and trust intimately, to the point where you can talk about her coming with other people and everything, to be able to like have her come home and give you a rundown of how her date went and what was good and what was bad and what turned her on and what didn't turn her on and what turned her off and what her messages on Tinder look like and how many people approach her in the bar and how many people approach her at work and how they do it and how she responds to those different things and how she looks at people we both know with money compared to non-money and how she looks at people we both know that have status compared to no status and how things like humor attract her compared to other things. Like, I think there's a lot of information there that we can discuss too, but we're about over time for today's podcast. And that was an introduction to our relationships podcast with Franky Balls and the Franky Balls Show, talking about cold approach pickup, relationships, business, and time management. Cheers.